So an eventful week for the Montreal Canadiens. A pair of back-to-back wins, Jacob Fowler back for the American Hockey League, and everybody wondering what the future of Sam Montembeault is going to be. Couple that with the fact that the Canadiens are taking on the Sharks tomorrow night, and they've made a couple of minor deals today, and we have a hell of a lot to talk about. Let's go live. Welcome back, everybody, to another live edition of PuckTalk Montreal. I am, of course, Coach K, otherwise known as Kosta Papoulias in legal circles. And got to tell you, it's been a hell of a week for Montreal. You take a look at the two games that they played this week, one against Toronto, one against Ottawa, wins in both. The reemergence of Jacob Fowler at the NHL level as he was called up by the Canadiens on Wednesday. And you sit there and you say to yourself, what's going on? Well, last night I posted a show about the future of goaltending in Montreal and could they go into the playoffs with two rookies. And of course, I asked about Sam Montembeault. And here's the fun part. I got accused of being a French journalist or being part of the French media. I am the furthest thing from French you could possibly get to. Okay? Born to Greek immigrants. I'm not French. Do I know how to speak a language? Absolutely. Am I French? Hell no. So let's get away from that. Never been accused of being French. Never thought I'd be accused of being French. I am not a Sam Montembeault apologist by any way, shape, or form. What I am is a guy who sits down and looks at the global picture, and I ask myself and I ask you questions that I want to hear answers for. And I ask the simple question, do you go with the two rookies? Or do you spot check Montembeault into the lineup and see if maybe he could bring something to the table in the playoffs? I got my answer. By and large, everybody said, nope, screw Montembeault, let's go with the two rookies. And you know what? I actually agree with you. I'm not disagreeing. Personally, I think Monty's career is done. I think Eric Raymond screwed him up so bad it's not even funny. So, you know, would I wish him ill? No, obviously not. But I think it's time that the Canadiens turned the page from Sam Montembeault and went with their rookies. That leads us to what happened today. Now, the first thing that happened today wasn't that big of a deal. And that is that the Canadiens signed Luke Mittelstadt to a 2-year contract and a one-way deal for the end of this season so that he can join the Laval Rocket for their playoff push. Mittelstadt is a left-handed defenseman. He's a depth player. Nothing really to talk about there. So, you know, it is what it is. They added more defensive depth, which is something that Kent Hughes likes to do all the time, right? It's the second thing that happened today that really got me thinking and kind of solidified all of our thinking. And that is the trade that sent Hunter Shepard and Jake Chiasson to Montreal in exchange for Riley Kidney. Now, Riley Kidney, of course, a very good offensive player for the Laval Rocket, but really because of his size, he's not projected to be any type of NHL player. Maybe not yet. Maybe down the road, nobody knows. But in the meantime, the Canadiens got back a couple of good pieces. One is Jake Chiasson, who gives them a little bit more depth on right defense. Wait for it. And then goaltending depth in Hunter Shepard. And putting Shepard in Laval means only one thing. He's there to back up Kapanen, which means Jake Fowler is no longer going back down to the American Hockey League. At least that's my interpretation. Nothing's been set in stone. Obviously, Fowler can always go back to the American Hockey League, and at which point Shepard can be sent down to the ECHL and the Trois-Rivières Lions, who are the affiliate team of the Montreal Canadiens there. But overall, when you think about it, Shepard's just a backup plan, right? I don't foresee the Fowler going back, not the way Monty's been playing. I don't think the Canadiens have any trust in Montembeault, so there you have it. The second part of this, Jake Chiasson, is another interesting piece because I've been clamoring for weeks now that the Montreal Canadiens need to bring up David Reinbacher. David Reinbacher being a right-handed defenseman. Cue Jake Chiasson, who is a right-handed defenseman. He's going to the Laval Rocket. David Reinbacher can be called up as of March 16th, which is Monday. What does that tell you? Wink, wink, hint, hint. To me, it sounds like David Reinbacher is primed to be coming to the Montreal Canadiens in short order. I might be wrong. I'm just reading the tea leaves here. But to me, it makes total sense for Kent Hughes to make these deals to be able to create some organizational depth in order to make the moves that he wants going into the playoffs. Now, of course, there's no guarantee that Reinbacher is going to come to the Canadiens and be the defenseman that I expect him to be, or that a lot of people expect him to be. But lo and behold, that's what happens here. So tell me if you agree or disagree. I personally think Shepherd is depth for Laval. Chiasson is a replacement on the right side for Reinbacher when he gets called up on Monday. I could be wrong, but it's a good discussion to have. So make sure that you put it in the chat. We'll get to it later in the show. Now, there is another thing that I wanted to bring up, and that is something that happened to me on Twitter, which I prefaced yesterday in yesterday's show, regarding someone on Twitter. And we got into a back and forth. And the back and forth was all about me, call it refuting, calling bullshit, on a report that implied that the Montreal Canadiens were trying to make a deal for Matthew Knies with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And like for all the sense that that deal would make from a roster perspective, it doesn't make any sense from an organizational perspective. Let's put it this way, okay? Unless there's somebody significant leaving Montreal and going to Toronto, there's no way the Montreal Canadiens can accommodate Knies' $7.1 million contract. That's number one. Number two, and this is a personal preference of mine, and it has nothing to do with the report, but honestly, I don't think I would touch a Maple Leaf right now if you paid me. Okay? There's so much turmoil within that organization, so much vitriol. I mean, you take a look last night. Austin Matthews getting injured by Radko Gudas. And what was the response by the team? Zero. That tells me that that team has absolutely no character. So you're going to ask me to go out and make a deal for a guy like Matthew Knies based on numbers, but not based on what else he brings to the table in terms of character. And I'm sorry, seeing as how Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton both put so much emphasis on the character of the people they go out to get, that's not a deal that I think they wanted to make. And I honestly, all I did was in a tweet with my friend Rick Springhetti of Habscast, who I've known for years, I just said, if that, is what the report is, then I have a bridge off the west island of Montreal that's falling apart that I have for sale. To which someone else, who will remain nameless because I do respect the guy, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to bash him or anything, but he asked me if I was refuting the report. And honestly, I can't, and I don't think anybody can, because nobody's got any tangible proof. Because why? The Canadiens didn't make any deals at the deadline. So there's no way of knowing one way or the other whether or not Knies was on the table. Fast forward 24 hours after this whole Twitter debacle, and it's confirmed by Elliot Friedman that he's spoken to multiple people and that the Knies deal with Montreal was bullshit. So I come back to all of this again. To everybody out there who watches this show, I don't like dealing with rumors for this exact reason, okay? You bring something up, everybody questions your credibility. I have been doing this for a very long time. I worked for CBC Daybreak, where I did sports. I had my own contacts there. I did that for a couple of years, replacing Andy Bennett, who a lot of people in the Montreal area know very well in the sports scene. And so when she would go do the Olympics, or she would do, whether summer or winter, I would replace her at that sports desk and do sports on Daybreak with the then host Mike Finnerty. And so I got my own contacts. I got my own people to talk to. And I won't talk about anything unless I hear it from more than one individual. At that point, it gives it a little bit of validity. Is it absolute gospel? Fuck no. Not until the Canadiens make a move. So how about we back off of all this conjecture and trying to take away people's credibility when honestly, there's not a single person this year who got anything right in terms of the Canadiens, including said person who said that the Canadiens would be traded by, the Canadiens would trade Patrik Laine by February 26th. That didn't happen either. So while we have sources to get information and create discussion points, that's all they are, discussion points. Nothing is etched in stone until Kent Hughes puts a signature to paper and the player is out of town. So whether you talk about it or whether you don't, if you want to call it a trade rumor or you want to talk about it as a prospective trade or a trade discussion, I don't care how you frame it. It's all conjecture until it happens. And so questioning a person's credibility based on that is just you trying to make yourself feel better about yourself. And again, the person I'm talking about, I respect them very much for what they do, okay? They've done it for a long time. They've done excellent work, oftentimes being right, other times being wrong. Nobody points it out when you're wrong. Everybody points it out when they're right, okay? So let's leave well enough alone. Stop with this whole nice bullshit because that's all it is. There's no way the Montreal Canadiens are making a deal in division with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's almost as bad as suggesting the Canadiens are going to make a trade with the Bruins. And we did that earlier this year when we talked about Pavel Zacha. And I said it then and I'll say it now. There are two teams in the NHL that I don't think the Montreal Canadiens are interested in making deals with. One's Toronto, one's Boston. Why? Because they're rivals and heated and bitter. And yes, the Canadiens made a minor league deal with the Ottawa Senators. That is not at the level of a Nyes deal or a Zacha deal. So let's leave it alone. Stop trying to question people's credibility. I'm not here saying I'm perfect. I never will. The only person in this world that was perfect was crucified, if that tells you anything. So let's just take what we do for what it is. It's talk, it's entertainment, and that's it. Whether you click on my show or whether you don't, I'm going to tell you my opinion, and if you enjoy it, great. If you don't, there's plenty of other channels to go to who are either fanboys, who think they know what they're doing, or think they have credibility, and that's fine. I personally know where I stand when I tell you guys something and something comes out of my mouth. I know how valid it is. I know how invalid it is. I actually know the reason why Patrik Laine wasn't traded. I will not share it with people because I've been asked not to. You want to talk about credibility? That's where it is. Okay? So let's leave it all alone. Let's move forward here. And let's stop with, trade this and trade that. It's done. The deadline's come and gone. If the Canadiens make a trade now, whoever we get is not eligible for the playoffs. So screw it. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference. Does it? So let's get away from it. And we'll continue on with something else. And so let's move on to one of the real subjects at hand today. And that is, of course, the game coming up Saturday against the San Jose Sharks. We all know the Sharks lineup. We know who's going to be in there. We know that Macklin Celebrini is going to be a big part of this game. But ask yourself this question. Why the hell did the Montreal Canadiens lose to the San Jose Sharks 7-5 in San Jose? It wasn't because the Sharks were that much better. It was because the Canadiens were just that bad, okay? Whether you take a look at the goaltending or whether you take a look at the forwards or, again, the second period, there's all kinds of things that went wrong in that hockey game, and we'll go over them here. So here's 5 things that went completely wrong for the Canadiens in San Jose. It started with another one of their classic second period meltdowns. The Canadiens had control of this hockey game. They had a 2-1 lead going into the second period, and everything was fine. But then, everything came off the rails. The Sharks scored 3 goals in the second period, take control of the hockey game, and the Canadiens just absolutely lose their structure. Their coverage goes out the window, and all the momentum swings from the Canadiens over to the San Jose Sharks. And here's the problem again with these second periods. We know that the long change has been a problem for the Montreal Canadiens all season long. And because of that, you would think they would emphasize it just a little bit more during the second period. But they don't. Instead, they continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. They overextend their shifts, they change lines at the wrong time, and that creates offensive openings for the Sharks in the offensive zone. So the Canadiens absolutely need to be better during the second period against the Sharks because they're going to take advantage of it with their speed and their talent. The second thing that went wrong for them is the fact that they let Macklin Celebrini run roughshod all over the entire team. I mean, They gave Celebrini so much space that it was ridiculous. Okay, he drove the game for the San Jose Sharks all night long. Every time he had the puck on his stick, he was dangerous. And so, for whatever it is, and it's not as if Celebrini cannot be checked. He can. But the Canadiens had no answer for San Jose's most dangerous player. And that kind of gets to me because if you're going to game plan right against a kid like Celebrini, and you know how much he dominates the game for that team, shadow him. Every time he's on the ice, send a forward out to cover him. And the same one every single time. And let's see what happens. If you're going to continue to go Suzuki versus Celebrini, I'm sorry, for as good as Nick Suzuki is, you're going to lose that battle all game long because Suzuki can't match him stride for stride. Simple concept for me. He's not fast enough or fleet enough a foot, to put it in a better way, to be able to cover Celebrini. He's too elusive with his skating, and he's too fast. Two things that Suzuki just can't handle. And that is, of course, as good as Suzuki is. Let me reiterate that. Then you had it being 5-5 and an absolutely brutal too many men on the ice penalty by the Montreal Canadiens. That simply cannot happen. All right? San Jose scored their winner on that power play. So it was a direct result of a mistake again made by the Montreal Canadiens because of lack of concentration. Not only by the guy going to the bench, who on that particular play was Laine Hutson, but the guy coming off. You need to be smarter than that in key times of the hockey game. You have to pay attention to detail. When you get on the ice is attention to detail. Now, granted, that change should not have happened with the puck going into the offensive zone. In no way, shape, or form. That's on Hutson. That's overextending his shift too long and taking too long to get to the bench afterwards. So that discussion, I'm sure it was already had with Marty St. Louis. But by the same token, you can't jump off the bench when Hutson is 10 feet away from the door. That is just plain stupid. And that's where the mistake happened. I forget who the player was who came on, so I apologize. But that can't happen. Those are the little details that a lot of people will miss, that coaches know about and correct all the time, but get forgotten by players. Why? Because when you're out there too long and you overextend your shift, there's a thing called mental fatigue that kicks in. And all you give a rat's ass about is getting your body to the bench so the next guy can come on at that point. Okay, and for everything that Laine Hutson does well, that was one of those things that was absolutely horrible for the Montreal Canadiens. And then, of course, there was no composure after the comeback. The Canadiens did the hard part. They came back in the hockey game, right? They were down 5-2. They came back, they tied at 5-5. They did all the legwork. And then they gave it right back to him with the too many men on the ice penalty. It's poor discipline, poor game management, and no late control by the Canadiens. All these things are, in and of themselves, a microcosm of a young hockey team. And we all need to accept those mistakes right now because the guys are young and they're going to make errors like that. But when the competitive window opens for the Montreal Canadiens, those things have to go away, and the Canadiens need to be a hell of a lot more disciplined in terms of line changes, in terms of game management, and in terms of just their mentality. They need to know everything that's going on the ice at every single minute of the game. If they don't, then they don't deserve to be wearing the crest on their jersey, period. Now, the next thing that we're going to bring up is what the Canadiens need to do better. So, one of the things they need to do is survive momentum swings, and there's going to be plenty of them, right? One bad stretch can't sink this team for the entire game. They're going to need to be consistent from minute 1 to minute 60. Make sure, like I said, they manage their second period properly and stop the bleeding fast. Don't wait for the San Jose Sharks to score 2 and 3 and 4 goals. You're down 1, get it back. You're up 1, get another. Just remain aggressive. When the Canadiens don't play aggressive hockey and they don't play offensively minded hockey where they push instead of trying to defend, that's where they get themselves into trouble. That's what happened against the Sharks in that second period. Instead of keeping the momentum and pushing the game forward. The Canadiens decided to draw back a little bit because it was a second period, and the Sharks just took complete advantage of them. So that can't happen. The second thing they got to do, as I mentioned, shut down Macklin Celebrini. Okay? I don't care how you have to do it. I don't care who the guy that's going to cover him is, but you got to make sure you don't allow him to control the game again. Keep tighter gaps. Pressure him when he's got the puck. Less time and space. Don't give him any opportunity to think. When you do that, he's already beaten you. So if you look at the Canadiens roster, who do you think is good enough to be able to cover him? Well, if you take a look at the first line, there's nobody really there that has the acumen to be able to cover him or the speed. Personally, I think the perfect guy to cover him, given his defensive ability, would be Alex Newhook. Newhook on the ice with Celebrini, you're matching speed, you're matching versatility, and you're matching brains, right? Whether it's Celebrini on the offensive side or Newhook on the defensive side. That doesn't mean that Newhook can't contribute offensively, but what it means is for one game and one game only, his primary focus is shutting down Macklin Celebrini. And if you do that, you're going to come out on the right side of the ledger. You also have to eliminate dumb mistakes, whether it's bad pinches, stupid bench penalties, as an example. Don't inflict self-inflicted wounds. Don't get yourself into trouble. Stay disciplined, be better, stay off the penalty kill as much as possible, because we know with Macklin Celebrini there, the San Jose power play is absolutely crazy good. And you're going to be fine. But you have to play smart hockey. It can't be you're just out there to go through the motions. You've got to make sure that you play with a certain fervor and a certain wherewithal to be able to mitigate what San Jose is going to be given. Don't delay, give them speed to the neutral zone. Trap if you have to. Slow them down. Stack the blue line. Whatever it takes. But don't make dumb mistakes when you do. Right? Don't pinch too aggressively when you know that Celebrini's on the ice. Rule of thumb. Because he's going to be able to jump out of the zone faster than you could turn around and catch up to him. The next thing they're going to have to do is get a key save. And now Dobish has been better since that game, okay? But he's got to be just as good. I'm presuming now that he gets a start on Saturday. That hasn't been announced yet, but I'm hoping he does because he deserves it. And whether it's him or Jacob Fowler for that matter, they need to get saves. All right? When coverage breaks down, your goalie has to make the big one, okay? It's not every save, just the ones that's going to settle the game. So if the Canadiens do take a bad penalty, your goalie's got to be your best penalty killer. If the Canadiens are giving up too many odd man situations, your goalie's got to be your best defender. Simple as that. Allow him to make the first save. Let him see the puck. Take the screens away. Box out in front of the net. Let your goalie do his job and allow him to give you the key saves that are going to help you win the hockey game. And the last thing is protect the comeback if it comes down to it again. All right? If Montreal falls behind and fights back, all right, don't necessarily lock it down, but keep the pedal to the metal. Keep pushing. Force the Sharks to play from their heels. Short shifts, smarter plays, clean exits, and don't hand it right back to them again. That's your formula. Control momentum, contain Celebrini, stay disciplined, get a big save when you need it, and play smarter after your pushback. You do that, and you're going to be in perfect position to win this hockey game. Now, finally, who needs to be better against the San Jose Sharks? Now, I presume, again, that Jakub Dobish is going to get the start, so he, number one, has to be better. He needs, as I mentioned, to make key saves when the Habs need him. He needs to give them better stability in nets because, admittedly, he said it himself, he wasn't very good in that hockey game. And he has to stop the game for snowballing because if there's one thing that the San Jose Sharks can do, they can bring it. And if they bring it and your goaltender's not ready for it, you're in big trouble, as we saw last week. So hopefully Dobish can stop the bleeding early and show the Sharks that he's got a better game in him and get them to think differently as opposed to being so clean north-south. The second guy has to be Cole Caufield. And I'm going to include Nick Suzuki in that as well because that line versus the Sharks was relatively invisible. I mean, Celebrini dominated that game, and in no way, shape, or form did Suzuki, Caufield, or even for that game, Kirby Dach. Montreal needs more offensive punch. Now, we've missed Caufield the other day versus the Ottawa Senators because he had the flu. Hopefully, he's back tomorrow, and we need more offensive punch from him specifically. He's got to get more dangerous touches, and he's got to have a game-breaking presence to mitigate that game-breaking presence that Macklin Celebrini brings to the table. Then there's Kirby Dach. Now, Kirby Dach has been pushed down to the third line, right? But still, he needs to make an impact in a game from both ends. He can play well in his own zone, and he can contribute offensively. He's done good things. The puck just hasn't gone into the net for him. He's got to change that. He's got to control the puck more, and he's got to drive plays through the middle, which he has been, right? Even though he's not a centerman, he skates the puck up the middle of the ice, distributes, branches out to the wing. That is what you expect players to do when they're attacking the zone with speed. From the middle out and allow your center to create. That's fine. But the pucks need to start going in for him. Yes, he got a goal a few games ago, but it's got to be more consistent. We need more from him because if we're going to have any success going into the playoffs, the third and fourth line are going to need to be able to contribute here and there. And then, of course, I put down Jayden Struble here. It could very well be Arber Xhekaj as well. But his depth, their depth, needs to be steadier. They need not be an untrustable resource on the Canadiens' blue line. Marty St. Louis needs to be able to trust them more. They need to have cleaner shifts, not make mistakes when they've got the puck out there, play a much cleaner game, and allow less chaos in their own zone. And this applies more to Struble than it does Xhekaj, because oftentimes Xhekaj and his physicality help him mitigate how much chaos there is in the Canadian zone. But when it comes to Struble, although he can be physical, oftentimes he finds himself on the wrong side of the puck and he makes the wrong read, and the puck ends up in the wrong area of the ice. So they need to be smarter when they're in the defensive zone. Offensively, I'm not expecting much from either of them. I know Arber's got the big shot. I know that Struble can pass the puck well. But when we need more is better defensive play from both of them, and hopefully we get it. So that's your list. Watch Dobish and Net be better. Caufield for offense. Dach through the middle. Hutson on details. And Struble for defensive liability. Did I even mention Laine Hutson? Well, he's got to be sharper defensively too. I missed that part of my whole discussion, right? He needs to have cleaner reads, better control of the puck, and he needs to pay stronger attention to detail. As I said, he ended up being the guy out there too long for the too many men on the ice penalty. So he's got to be a little bit more engaged in the game and understand his situational presence, not just his offensive and defensive presence. Now that all that is said and done, what do you think the Canadiens need to do? Put it in the chat. How do you think they beat San Jose? Right? And for those of you that joined in later, what do you think of the Canadiens' move today, trading Riley Kidney for, Shepard and Chiasson from the Ottawa Senators? Shepard the goalie, Chiasson right-handed defenseman. Tell me what you think. Now it's my favorite time of the show. Time for us to get to the chat. And I absolutely love doing this because we have so much good conversation. So who's out there today? We've got Joe, we've got Violet, we've got Jeff, we've got Emfirio, Nick, or Nikos, I should say, Seramides. Who else have we got? And Roy, of course. Roy is probably playing golf, which is why he redacted his comments. But anyway, I digress. So we're going to get to Violet's question first because she put it to me yesterday in the show I did about the goaltenders. And I thought it would be apropos. Considering my point about the goalies needing structure, in my opinion, do the Habs or should the Habs go to a zone D in the playoffs? How would man-to-man and zone differ from a goalie's point of view? Well, if there's one thing that zone defense does is it allows a goaltender to know who's going to be where, for the most part anyway. There are some times where when you're playing zone defense, players move out of position based on their coverage, right? Let's say, for example, the guy at the point comes in below the hash marks. His partner goes back towards the point. Sometimes, because of who the player is on the ice, you allow for the switch. But you don't want your defenseman going too high, So that switch often reverses itself. But for a goaltender, as I said, it's very easy to know who's going to be where, right? Because of the fact that they're playing in specific zones. You have 4 zones in the defensive zone, plus the area in front of the net that's the danger zone, which is normally covered by either the center, the low weak side defenseman, or a winger. One of the 3. But at the end of the day, it's covered. And what happens is you have your 4 guys that cover the 4 zones, plus you have your center that works more as a rover, and he's able to move between zones. And whether you want to call it your center, your F1, whoever the first guy back was, you can go with whatever you want. But at the end of the day, there's always one guy who can move around all 4 zones to be able to provide support in defensive coverage. And so that becomes extremely predictable for goaltenders because they know exactly what to expect and which players are going to be where. When it comes to man-to-man, your goaltender needs to have a little bit more of a hockey IQ. And that's part of the reason why I see Montembeault struggling so much. I don't think he understands that type of coverage when it comes to man-to-man. He doesn't understand which player is going where. He doesn't see the play developing in front of him because it's not traditional. And as I mentioned a million times, traditionally, everybody in minor hockey learns to play zone +1, and they don't learn to play man-to-man. Man-to-man is primarily used for odd man situations where you're either up a man or down a man. Okay, so if that's the case, you're not going to use a box +1 at anything other than even strength. Okay, so for a team that is very strong at even strength, like the Montreal Canadiens, playing a man-to-man defense can be extremely hockey IQ intensive. Say that 3 times fast for anybody who's in goal. And if they don't have a proper understanding, if they're not students of the game, then therein lies the problem. Now, we've seen that with Montembeault, where he can't read backdoor plays. He doesn't really see what's going on around him. He doesn't recognize plays as they develop, and that costs goals against the Canadiens. When it comes to Dobish and it comes to Fowler, if there's one thing that their goaltending is predicated on, it's anticipation. Knowing what's going to happen in front of him, knowing who's where on the ice, whether it's his own players or the opposition's players, and then taking advantage of that read to be able to be in better position to stop pucks. So it's not necessarily just about man-to-man Violet versus zone defense. It's more along the lines of your goalie's ability to understand the game of hockey. It's easy to put any schlub in front of the net with goalie equipment with a natural ability to stop a puck, okay? What's harder is to put somebody in front of a net who understands the game, sees what's going on in front of him, and can not only decipher that for himself, but he can be an effective communicator with the defenders around him to be able to make them better and give them a better chance to be able to clear the front of the net or get pucks out of the zone effectively. It all goes hand in hand. The best goalies in history are not only guys that understand the game, but are extremely vocal, okay? When you take a look around, somebody like a Patrik Roy was extremely vocal in goal. Ken Dryden, another intelligent man, extremely vocal in goal. Marty Brodeur, Roberto Luongo. The list goes on and on of guys that aren't just goalies, but they're effectively your 6th defenseman. And like any other defenseman out there, they understand the game and they can project what they see to somebody that might be coming in with maybe his back turned to the play, and the goalie yells wheel, and he just skates behind the net and comes out the other side. Or he screams stop, and the defenseman grabs the puck and stops him behind the net, turns around and assesses what's going on around him. It's the same when it comes to play recognition. You recognize the play, you can be better as a goaltender. So all of it goes hand in hand. A smart goaltender ends up being able to do better things in front of the net. It's as simple as that. And do I think Monty's got that intelligence? No, I really don't. It's unfortunate to say, but given his track record and what he's done, no, he's not smart enough to be able to do what I'm expecting to do in regards to helping his defense out. But really, there's no difference. Joe, what was your question again, by the way? Because you say here, last chance, Coach Kosta, to answer your question. So let me know what it is. Put it back in the chat, and I'll be able to answer it for you. Last couple of nights, opponents have ridiculously outshot the Leafs by greater than 3 times in the first. that the Leafs are a joke right now. They're a dumpster fire. Whether you listen, I occasionally I do this, so don't hate me for it. But because of the whole Nyes thing that I brought up earlier in the show, I listened to the Steve Dangle podcast, and even he thought it was snake oil being sold to people. And so when he got to starting to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, the first thing he said, which I've also said multiple times, they need to get rid of Brad Treliving because he's ineffective in terms of what kind of general manager he is. He didn't know what kind of player he wanted in Calgary. He certainly doesn't know what kind of player he needs in Toronto. He makes no moves. He doesn't get any draft capital for his team. So they're going into their draft week again, which means what? It means that the Leafs are going to be status quo for at least the next year or two or three. They need to get better. They need draft capital to be able to rebuild, and they just haven't got it. But this is PuckTalk Montreal, not PuckTalk Toronto, so we're no more talking about the Leafs here. Joe, just watched the Arber Xhekaj story. Didn't know his family suffered so much to get to Canada. Great story, and I wish MSL will give this fan favorite more of a chance or we trade him. Look, I've seen the Xhekaj story too, and while it's a heart tugger for a lot of people, right, especially guys like me whose parents were first generation from another country, it should never influence the decisions made by a coach, right? You want to see the guy do well, and he has. I mean, you listen to everything in that story about Xhekaj not being drafted to junior, making it with the Kitchener Rangers, getting traded to the Hamilton Bulldogs, and winning the OHL championship. Then not getting drafted to the National Hockey League, getting a tryout with the Montreal Canadiens, and making the team out of camp. Those are all huge things, but they also come with a certain level of expectation, not only for the player, but from the organization as well. So you're expecting Arber Xhekaj to do great things. He's done great things so far, but the one thing that he hasn't done that the Canadiens haven't seen is develop. And now you want him to develop at the National Hockey League level. That goes without saying. You want him to be better in his own zone. You want him to make better reads. I want all the best for this kid. I swear to God I do. But if he's going to be a detriment on the back end, he can't be on the blue line. If he's going to be an addition and a strong one, and he has been in recent games, then let him play. Use him. They're not going to trade him. He's an RFA at the end of the year with arbitration rights. So they're most likely going to qualify him, possibly go to arbitration, figure things out, and he'll get another year, maybe two from the Canadiens. Or they may do what they did with Struble and just avoid arbitration altogether and sign him to another deal. But all that being said, if they're going to do that with Xhekaj, they need to, and I emphasize this, they need to let him develop a little bit more at the NHL level so he can be the defenseman that we think that he can be. And it's not just about chucking the mitts and getting into fights. We're talking about somebody who's shown aptitudes to actually play defense the right way. He just needs the time to develop and the patience from the coaching staff. And I'm not talking about Marty. I'm talking about that D coach on the back end, Stefan Robida. I called out Eric Raymond for the work he did with the goalies. I call out Stefan Robida for the lack of work he's done for the defensemen. There's a lot of D. You're looking Struble, you're looking Xhekaj. Two kids on that blue line that needed development and haven't gotten it from their coach. Instead, they've been stapled to the end of their bench when they haven't played well. I'm sorry. There's another guy on that blue line by the name of Alexander Carrier who's been putrid. And only because he shoots from the right side, it's the only reason he's still in the lineup, in my opinion. So, whatever it is, right? Stefan Robida needs to teach. That's what coaching is. It's teaching, pure and simple. Whether it's you teaching players one-on-one, teaching them as a group, it's all the same thing. You're teaching them how to play the game. You're teaching them the systems, the concepts, whatever jargon you want to use to be able to win. Arber Xhekaj and Jayden Struble are not getting that opportunity. And that doesn't fall just on Marty St. Louis. It falls mostly and primarily on Stefan Robida. Let's keep going here. Jeff, I understand your reasoning, but we need a little more for Cage on the cap space. Do we? He's on entry level and it's prorated, right? His entry level contract, I think, is $975, as it is for Reinbacher and it is for Jacob Fowler. So those three combined, if you take them and you prorate that for the last 20 games of the year, they fit under the cap. The Canadiens have $1.3 or $1.4 million of prorated space. So I don't see why we're getting those three guys in as a problem. If you can explain that a little bit, Jeff, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that all three can play without the Canadiens going over the salary cap. Yes, Joe, as you mentioned here, I don't throw trade rumors in the air to see if it sticks. It's not worth the trouble. You know what? I'll explain why I don't do it. Because, you know, it's not just a decision I came to lightly, right? Because it's easy for me to come out here and talk trade rumors so that you guys can click on videos and, you know, listen to whatever garbage spews out of my mouth, right? True or not. But when it comes to trade rumors, I learned this a long time ago from Brian Wild, who's now with Global, but at the time he was a CTV. And I asked him the question up front. We were at McLean's Pub for the Alex Galchenyuk draft. And I asked him straight up because I wanted to learn. I wanted to do things the right way, all right? And Brian and I, previous to that, had a couple of back and forths, and he thought I was going in a certain direction, and I explained myself, and he respected what I was thinking, but he said I should do it a different way. So I took advantage of that offer to speak, and I asked him. And he told me upright that it's always better to, and I've heard this from other people too, and I think Eric Engels has repeated it, it's better to be right than better to be first. A lot of people go out there and think being first is always right. You know, there's a reason why there's a Twitter account called Hockey Insider, because he spews bullshit like anybody's business, but he's right 0.01% of the time. So, I mean, it is what it is, right? But because of that, I'm able to get other sources, I'm able to get stories from other people, and I'm able to get truth. And because I don't come out and just spew it out and tell people just to get attention, that's why I still have people I can talk to. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand about this business when it comes to talking hockey and getting stories and scoops and trade rumors, very often, more than you will ever know, the rumors themselves are started by teams just to pick at the market, to try to set it, to try to have people figure out and see whether or not there's actually interest, okay? So oftentimes you'll hear about a deal just so that they can gauge the market to see if the other team is interested and so forth, right? 2 years in a row, folks, 2 years in a row, the Canadian side, Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? That was the story. I still don't see Pierre-Luc Dubois in a Canadiens uniform. All that interest from the Canadiens wasn't interest from the Canadiens. It was his agent spinning it so that he can get a better deal. As an example, teams do that too, not just agents. So be very, very careful at what stories you choose to believe and which ones you choose not to, because more often than not, the ones that you think are true aren't, and the ones you think that are not true aren't. Just my experience, guys. Inferio, the youngest team in the NHL, is still on a learning curve. They will only continue to get better. You're not going to get an argument from me on that point. Absolutely. And, you know, I'm still of the mind that I'm prepared to live with the mistakes right now, right? But again, it comes back to what I said at the beginning of the season before they even dropped the puck. I looked at everything and I said one thing that nobody has ever given me credit for, by the way, but I'm not looking for it. But it'd be nice to hear it from time to time. I told everybody that I knew that I thought the Canadiens would be in contention for the top of the division this year. Everybody. I told them that without Marner, the Toronto Maple Leafs would stink up the joint. And I told everybody that the Buffalo Sabres would move up in the standings and that Tampa would be up and down this year. I didn't miss at all, right? The Canadiens are still in contention for the division title. The Buffalo Sabres are a hell of a lot better than they were. In fact, they're at the top of the division right now. And Tampa has had their injury troubles, and they've been up and down all year. So, and of course, Toronto sucks. Goes without saying. So, not wrong on any count. But you don't hear anybody saying, yeah, you know what? Coach called this at the beginning of the year. Because you know what? I'm just a small channel and nobody bothers listening to me all that often, right? The big boys get 20,000 and make guesses that are completely wrong. And the small guys that guess right don't get the credit that they deserve sometimes. And that, to me, it's wrong. I don't look for the attention. I don't want it. I don't care. But occasionally, it would be nice for your peers to turn around and say, you know what? Kosta was right and he deserves the credit. Simple as that. And I know they listen to this podcast because they leave me messages about it. Violet, I think Celebrini is the scariest player I have seen versus the Habs all year. Shadow defender is probably the answer. It is. I mean, there's no better way to do it, right? And I'm going to go back to the 1993 Stanley Cup Final. The Canadiens were down I almost said it. I was at Game 2. They were down 1-0 versus the LA Kings. And during the second game, Guy Carbonneau pulled aside Coach Jacques Demers and told him, give me Gretzky. He won't be anything against us. And what happened? Guy Carbonneau covered Gretzky the entire series after that, and he pretty much took away anything that Gretzky could do. In fact, Gretzky looked like a hell of a frustrated player at the end of that series. He was checked to death, right? So to put a player to defend a specific person on the ice, it's not a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a condemnation of your defensive system or the defenseman that you have. It's actually help for them. So there's no harm, no foul in doing that. Morning, Roy. Playing golf? Coach K from Nikos Seramidis. Coach K, I do miss having Armia in the lineup. He was one of our most underrated players last year. In fact, Nico, just to go further than that, I think he was one of the most underrated players throughout his time with the Montreal Canadiens. Underrated in terms of stick handling and defensive coverage, and he would occasionally contribute on the offensive side. But the thing about players in Montreal is very simple to me, and it may not describe everybody, including people that listen to this show, but it describes a lot of people. The sexy player on the Montreal Canadiens is always the better player. That has never been true, right? As I mentioned, Guy Carbonneau wasn't the sexiest player on the ice, but oftentimes the best player on the ice for the Montreal Canadiens. Bob Gainey, good Lord, was he not a sexy hockey player. But defensively, he's the reason why the Frank J. Selke Award exists, right? And you can go up and down the list of players throughout the National Hockey League and the Montreal Canadiens who weren't the greatest players, but, they still brought something to the table that was really important. You take a look at Chris Nyland, and Mitch Melnick mentioned him today, and that's why I bring him up. Chris Nyland, a low-level draft pick for the Montreal Canadiens, ends up playing the majority of his career next to two Hall of Famers, and had the capacity not only to drop the gloves and defend his teammates, but could score 20 goals in a season. When was the last time you saw a player like that in the National Hockey League? Outside of maybe Rob Probert. That's what I'm saying here. It doesn't always necessarily need to be the sexy guy that people love. And that goes for Yoel Armia. It goes for Christian Dvorak, too. Dvorak was very instrumental in the Canadiens making the playoffs last year. I think he had 20 points down the stretch. Nobody talked about that. Dvorak was there to take faceoffs. Yeah, but Dvorak got some of the most important points of the season when the Canadiens needed it the most and weren't getting contributions from their top line. And I think Armia himself wanted to change the scenery, to be honest. I don't think the Canadiens really wanted him to go, but Armia is definitely somebody that we miss in Montreal, because could you imagine how much better a penalty kill would be if he was still here? Yeah, definitely. Against Buffalo and LA, two teams that he loved playing against. Jeff, they announced Dobish for tomorrow's game. That'd be great if that's the case. Actually, let me take a quick look. You might be right, but I didn't hear anything. Normally, it'll come up against on my feed. 1 second. Come on, computer, be faster. Yep, Dobish confirmed for tomorrow. Thank you, Jeff. You're absolutely right. Still smoking one. Formerly Apache. Why the change in handle? But I like it. Joe, I loved Kidney, but he was a casualty of our talented farm system. It's not just that, Joe. There's a lot of players that are that same ilk in Laval, right? Take a look at Sean Farrell, for example. He and Kidney are they're the same type of player, basically. And for organizational depth purposes, you need guys that are versatile. Now, that doesn't mean that the Canadiens went out and got versatility in trading Kidney for Chiasson and Shepherd, but they got organizational depth, which, is par for the course. But because they have a guy like Sean Farrell, and also because Philip Meshar is having a better season, that made Riley Kidney expendable. And so that's the reason why they got rid of him. It's not because of anything that Kidney did, but when you have too much of the same thing, that lack of versatility can hurt your team. So I understand the move. I respect the move because it actually addresses two areas that the Canadiens needed to get better at. And so, all is better in the Habs world for it. Jackie Langley, welcome to the show. It's the first time you've contributed, I believe, so welcome. How far do you think the Habs can ride Dobish and Fowler into the playoffs? And sorry, missed early if already addressed. No, it wasn't already addressed. I did do a show yesterday in terms of going into the playoffs with two rookie goalies. And for anybody out there who's watching, please go back and watch the show from yesterday. I think they could go very far. Historically, the Canadiens have done this all the time. The only time it didn't work out is when they decided to try it with Steve Penny, right? Where they brought him in late in the season and he lost against the Quebec Nordiques in the first round because he couldn't catch a hockey puck. That didn't last very long, right? But historically, the Canadiens haven't been afraid to use rookie goaltenders, right? Whether it's Ken Dryden, whether it's Patrick Waugh. They've had success with both. They've won Stanley Cups with both. So that's why I don't think the organization in and of itself has any fears. So long as the goalies are playing the type of game that they're expecting, there's no fear. It's when a goalie doesn't play the game they're expecting, a.k.a. Sam Montembeault, where there's questions to be asked. And that's the reason why the Canadiens may necessarily not go into the playoffs with a veteran presence. Maybe he's there for moral support, but I don't foresee Sam Montembeault playing in nets anytime soon for the Montreal Canadiens. If he gets a spot start here and there just for Marco Marciano to do an assessment, that's one thing, but that'll have to be done after the Canadiens have clinched or are close to clinching so that it doesn't hurt their playoff chances. But thank you for the question, Jackie, and welcome. Ryan the Hockey Guy, Chess Guy 1000. That is a mouthful. What? Who's the trade you can't trade past the trade deadline? Okay. I've had this discussion with people over the years, and they just haven't understood how the trade deadline works. So I'll lay it out for those of you that don't know. And Ryan, if you don't know, here's what it is, right? The trade deadline in and of itself is specifically the ability to trade players and be able to use them in the playoffs. Any player that's acquired after that is ineligible to play in the playoffs, but they can play for the team from the time they are acquired until the end of the season. Now, in this case, the trade doesn't necessarily apply because it's the American Hockey League. Their rules are different. But when it comes to the National Hockey League, any team can pick up a player after the deadline, right? Here's an example of something that may happen. It's a complete hypothetical, but I want you to get the understanding, okay? Let us say, for argument's sake, that a team in the National Hockey League has two players injured and they fall below the salary cap floor, okay? They need to be above the floor, otherwise they get penalized. What can they do? Well, they can trade for somebody like, let's say, a Patrik Laine after the deadline in order to get themselves to the end of the season above the salary cap floor. Once the playoffs are there, then your cap applies to only the 20 people that you're playing in your lineup. But at least your roster will be above the salary cap floor. You get what I mean? That's just an example. But historically, people have not realized this, that trades can happen throughout the year. But anybody that's traded for after the trade deadline can play with the team that they're acquired from, or they're acquired by, but they cannot participate in the postseason. That's the cutoff anyway in the National Hockey League. So trades can happen at any time. The deadline is just for trades to be made and players to be eligible for the playoffs. But that's a little bit too much to say, right? So they don't call it that, just call it a trade deadline. Okay. Ilio. I'm doing all right. For those of you that don't know, I've got this massive Band-Aid on my eye, or under my eye, because I've got a hole in my face where they did a biopsy. I don't have the results for it. I'm not going to have the results for at least a month or two. But thank you for asking. I'm feeling fine. I'm very shy, though, because of the fact that I do have this lump, this chunk missing from my face. But it'll grow back, and I'll be able to take the Band-Aid off eventually. But right now, it doesn't look like anything that I should be showing to people, so that's why I've got the Band-Aid on. It's going to be the other way around, Postman. It's going to be Dobish tomorrow and Fowler Sunday. Who do we have on Sunday anyway? I haven't even looked. Shame on you, Coach, for not looking. Hang on. Come on, go back. Come on, go back. Let's go. Sometimes I hate the Montreal Canadiens website because it doesn't load up properly. Good Lord, man. I wish I had my phone down here. Anyway, who knows who the Canadiens are playing on Sunday? I don't know why my computer's being so anal. There we go. Their website finally decided to answer. Come on. I know it's Sharks Saturday. I believe it's LA Sunday. No, it's Duck Sunday. Well, close enough. Anaheim, LA, 20 minutes apart. So, Ducks on Sunday. We'll talk about that after tomorrow's game during the post-game show. But, yeah, it's going to be... The Ducks are the team that the Canadiens should have beat but didn't because Montembeault played like hot garbage. So, given the fact that it's Fowler, there should be a better result. How's that for a pregame show? Still smoking. The keys to the Habs winning is to play their game and not to chase it. Hopefully, the two young goalies will push each other and get some steady goaltending going forward. I would tend to agree. The Canadiens love to shoot themselves in the foot, right, when it comes to how they play. We know that they've got speed. We know that they can play well when they push the puck up the ice. It's when they're in their own zone that they struggle. And that's not just them. That's most teams in the National Hockey League. When you've got possession and you're not playing defense, you're always better on defense. Rule of thumb, right? But, yeah, I think if the Habs play the way they're supposed to play, there's not very many teams in the National Hockey League that can keep up with them. But oftentimes what I find with Montreal isn't that they don't follow the game plan. They get away from it. And they start doing things that they think is better for them. They start defending. And when they do that, they get themselves into trouble. They end up playing the puck off their heels. Middlestad joined. I mentioned that earlier. What should we expect from him on the Rocket? Listen, he's a left-handed defenseman. It's left-handed depth. Nothing more. I don't think we're going to expect anything from him, to be honest. It'll be nice to see what he does in camp next year. I don't think he'll make the team because there's so much depth on the left side. But anybody pushing from behind on any one of Xhekaj or Struble or anybody else that's playing the left side is always a good thing. Internal competition, never something to complain about. But he's going to be a nice addition on the back end for the Rocket, that's for sure. Violet. Patrik was not only a third defenseman, he was also a fourth forward spinoramoing around Gretzky. You remember that, eh? Yeah, that was a one and done, by the way. Nick Saramides. I would move Anderson on the Evans line and use that line designated against Celebrini. That's a hell of an idea. And you wouldn't be wrong. But the problem with that is the fact that Celebrini plays all over the ice. So if that's the case, then if you put him out there with Evans and Anderson, would you put Bolduc on the right side so that you have speed throughout? Or would you maybe sit out a Bolduc and put in, say, maybe a Joe Veleno, who's better defensively? Food for thought, right? Let me know what you think, Nico. Call you Nick. Yeah, I should know that. Nick's my dad's name, but it was my dad's name, not is my dad's name. I lost him about 10 years ago, but anyway. Still smoking one. I don't know if the Habs are capable of playing a trap shutdown game, but this game would be a good one to play that style. Look, if there's one thing that Canadiens can do, and they've done before in the past, is clog the neutral zone, right? And they play in a cluster as opposed to playing stretched out. So instead of being, defenseman back, first forward back, wingers up towards the blue line and neutral zone, you bring them in deeper and you go up and down the zone as a group. And when you do that, you can end up clogging up the neutral zone and limiting the amount of space that Celebrini has to be able to work his magic. The danger in that is when you cluster like that and Celebrini gets through, you're screwed. So that's kind of the fear of it, but you can trap. The only thing is that sometimes that trap against players like Celebrini isn't quite as effective as you might think. Ryan likes to repeat himself all the time. I think we can make the playoffs with this roster. Could keep Fowler in net and send down Montembeault to the AHL. Okay, Ryan, you cannot send Montembeault to the AHL. If you do that, he has to go on waivers, and the minute you put Montembeault on waivers, somebody's going to snatch him up. You can't put him on waivers. What you can do is, because there's no roster limit, you could keep him in Montreal, and you don't have to send him down, right? So long as the entire roster is under the salary cap, Montembeault doesn't have to go anywhere, and it is right now. So let's leave it at that. He's not going anywhere. Engstrom would be better than Carrier, even though he usually plays on the left. That is true, but Reinbacher would be a hell of a lot better, and he's right-handed too. So that's why I said earlier, and I believe it to be true, after the 16th, look for Reinbacher to be brought up by the Montreal Canadiens. Is it MSL or Robida that doesn't trust Wi-Fi? I think it's both, but it's not specifically MSL. It's MSL listening to Robida, right? Because Marty never played defense. He was a forward. So for that type of, call it expertise or whatever, you have to defer to your assistants, right? It's like Patrick Waugh trying to teach a forward how to stick handle. It's not going to happen because Patrick Waugh doesn't know how to stick handle. He knows how to stop a puck. Does Patrick know how to defend? No. But he can certainly delegate it to his coaching staff and then trust what their coaching staff comes back and tells him. That is what Marty St. Louis does with Stéphane Robida. He does have a global idea of how he wants his defense to play. He wants them to play man-to-man, and that's the message he gives Robida, okay? And Robida will go back to MSL and tell him, listen, I saw this, I saw that. What do you think I should do? Marty will give his 2 cents as head coach, and then he'll go back and he'll make the decision and let Marty know what he decided. And that's why I keep telling everybody, it's not all about Marty St. Louis. There's this thing about head coaches, it's called delegation. Delegation of responsibility. Marty handles the power play. Who handles the penalty kill? Is it Letowski or is it Robida? I think it's Robida. But I digress, right? We don't know for sure. But at the end of the day, there's always a certain part of the game that's delegated to your assistant coaches. When it comes to your defenseman, he's going to go over to Robida and say, okay, based on what you saw in practice, who's the better guy to put out there? Or based on what you saw in the last time we played these guys, who's the better choice to go out there? Robida will tell him, okay, let's go with that guy. He'll take his opinion. And at the same time, when it comes to working with defensemen, Marty works with the forwards and with the group on power play, breakouts, etc. When it comes to individual and defensive tactics, that's Robida. So when you don't see a defenseman developing, that's Robida. When you don't see a defenseman fitting into a system, that's Marty St. Louis. There's a difference. And that's what I keep trying to tell people. It's easy to blame the head coach for everything because he's the center of attention, okay? But it's never all just about him, okay? For as good as Guy Carbonneau was as a coach behind the NHL bench, do you know that without Andy Murray, he got fired 2 months later? Why? Because he didn't have his eye in the sky, giving him scouting reports that were a mile long to go through. That was Andy Murray's thing. Andy Murray was great at breaking down film, breaking down live games, going out and pre-scouting teams, and then coming back and saying, okay, Guy, this is what I think we need to do. Carbonneau would look at the game plan. Okay, Andy, that's what we'll do. Thank you. And Marty would break it down, give it to each individual assistant, and they would go from there. Delegation. It's a big part of coaching, especially at the National Hockey League level. If you don't, it's like a football coach, right? The head coach of a football team is the head coach. But you've got a quarterback's coach, you've got a lineman coach, you've got an offensive coordinator, you've got a running backs coach. There's 53 players on a football team. And I just named off the guys on the offensive side. I didn't talk about the defensive backs coach, the defensive line coach, the linebackers coach. There's so many coaches in football. Who do you blame first? If you've got shitty linebackers, you're going to blame the head coach? Or are you going to look at the linebacker coach first? The head coach, is he not going to fire the linebacker coach first? You get where I'm going with this? It's the same for Eric Raymond. The goalies play like shit in the National Hockey League, and you're going to blame Marty St. Louis for the fact that his goaltenders are getting worse. Nope. You're going to blame Eric Raymond. They did. He got removed. It's the same with Robida. Job that's delegated needs to be done. Robida's got to do it. Doug Jarvis did not play with Chris Nyland. I know he's a Hall of Famer. He's the Iron Man. Great defensive player. Didn't play with Chris Nyland. And he was never the guy to shadow a player specifically. Jarvis played with Gainey too. And Gainey was the guy that shadowed players on that line. Joe, I think Arber played better before this benching. Christ, no one except Guhle plays exceptional defense on the Habs. You know what? I wouldn't technically agree with that. It's situational. Guhle's the most consistent, okay, for lack of a better term, okay? He's your best 200-foot defenseman, bar none, and I've said that a million times over. His only problem is he gets injured more often than not, right? And we've had more than one player on this team that's had that issue, whether you're looking at Kirby Dach or you're looking at Kaiden Guhle. But he is their best 200-foot defenseman. When it comes to Arber, okay, I didn't see how much he played last game, and I'm gonna go back and look just for reference. Where are we here? Just go back to see his last game. Nope, not that one. His last game would have been against Toronto, I think, right? Or did they play Struble back-to-back? I don't remember anymore. I thought Struble played against, not Struble, but Xhekaj played against Toronto. Hang on. Yeah, he did. He got 11 minutes in that game. And now 11 minutes is not a lot, but it's a lot closer to the 12 to 14 we talk about than it is the 7 and 8 that he was getting previous to that. I don't have a problem with that. A player can develop in 11 minutes of hockey. You know, that's not a big issue. And the last few times he's been out there, I think 2 of the last 3 games he's played upwards of about 12 and a half minutes. So that's not that bad. And I think they're starting to come around because they realize, yeah, he'll make a mistake, but he always makes up for it too. He's not the type of guy to hide behind the mistake and not, take accountability for the mistake that he makes on the ice. He always does. And so that type of thing needs to be trusted and needs to be encouraged so that players are accountable for their mistakes. Gudas got 5 games. He should have gotten more. Radko Gudas is an injury machine. You look at what he did to Sidney Crosby at the Olympics, as an example. And while Crosby said he didn't do anything wrong, I'm sorry. When a guy's in a full split and you put your 250-pound body on him, you did something wrong there. But yeah, he should have gotten more than that. He's got a history. 5 games is a little low. Joe, Armia played 1 good game out of every 10 games. I don't agree with that, man, because he was very good defensively. If you couldn't contribute offensively all the time, that's one thing. But you can always count on Armia to play defensively. I mean, hell, last year in the playoffs, he played with one hand. He couldn't shoot the puck. And you couldn't really tell. So, I mean, you got to give the guy his flowers. He's good at certain things. When he has both his hands, He's an excellent stick handler, and he's great at possessing the puck along the boards, right? And getting it over to either a defenseman or another forward for a scoring chance. But he's not the guy who's going to put up points. And again, I'll get back to it. It's not about the sexy player. It's about the effective player. And Armia was an effective player for the Canadiens. Nick, I don't know if Gallagher needs to sit out every other game. If there's a back-to-back, yeah, without question. You could swap him out and you could put in Joe Veleno in his spot or whatever you want. But Gallagher, I mean, he has the same problem as a lot of older players in this condensed schedule. It's very hard on the body. You know, he's an elder statesman. He's an assistant coach on this team. It's not something that you do, right? For everything that guy's done for this hockey club in the time he's been with Montreal. And trust me, Gallagher is going to retire a Montreal Canadien, in my mind. So, yeah, offer him a position with the team. I don't know if they'd sit him out. There's a lot to be said about glue guys on hockey clubs. And Gallagher's a glue guy, despite his inability to be as effective as he was last season, for example, where he flirted. Did he get or did he flirt with 30 goals? Regardless, he had a hell of a better season last year. This year's been tough for him. But if there's one thing about Gallagher you can always count on in the locker room, he's your glue. And you need guys like that in the locker room, especially in a condensed schedule. So, you know, you could talk about giving him a position with the team, but there's a lot of value that he brings to the table in the locker room, especially for a team that's this young. You don't have that many veterans to fall back on, right? So I'd leave well enough alone. I hate when people talk about benching Gallagher. I know he's not as effective as he used to be, but, you know, it's Gallagher, for crying out loud. Dobich is a rookie with a playoff victory. How often do you see that? Last time we saw it was a guy that wore number 29, I think, on Aces. Jeff, I was wondering, when do we start taking Galley out for some rest with the playoffs? You know, if you want to give him rest before the playoffs, as Nick suggested, maybe when they clinch would be the time to do it. Now, the Canadiens, I forget what the number is. Is it they need to win 1 out of every 2 to reach 100 points or something like that? Whatever the case is. They're close to clinching, right? The magic number is 93. So the minute you clinch, yeah, you could sit out Galley for a game or two or whatever. But until they do clinch, I would not. I'm not benching Galley at all. Let's see here. I think trade Carrier and a third-round pick for Askarov and a defenseman. Okay, Ryan, I'm going to ask you to do something, please. And I don't do this a lot, but stop throwing trades out there for us to discuss that don't make sense or at all. I mean, I would rather not do that because, one, San Jose is not trading Askarov. They just got him from Nashville. So to think that they're going to trade their number one goaltender is asinine to begin with, especially not for a guy like Carrier. The trades need to make sense, okay? If you're going to put a trade on here that makes sense, yeah, I'll discuss it, but don't just throw them out there. You've been doing it for a couple of shows now, and it really screws with the vibe that we have here in the community. So please don't. Stay away from trades. The trade deadline's come and gone. Let's not talk about them anymore, okay? We'll talk when they happen, not just for the hell of it. Joe, thank God Hughes is smarter than you guys. Dvorak, Savard, and Armia were not what to fit the system. Getting rid of them is why we are way better this year. Okay, Joe. Savard retired. They got rid of nobody in that case. Armia, they did not get rid of. He signed somewhere else, as did Dvorak. Okay, so it's not Hughes being smarter. Okay, what it is Dvorak wanted more money. Armia wanted to change his scenery. Okay, because he had been in Montreal for a while, and that's what happened. Okay, let's not try to put things out there that aren't true. Okay, you talk about me not doing it. That's definitely not true. Savard retired. He's done. He's not playing anywhere. Dvorak wanted more money. He went to Philly because they gave it to him, and now they've extended him too to boot. And then you've got Armia, who wanted more money from Montreal that they didn't have, and So he went to LA. I think he's in LA now, right? He went to LA instead. It's called business. It's not Hughes not wanting him back because he did. He wanted Dvorak back too for faceoffs, which is why mid-season he went out and he traded with LA to get Philip Danault because he was available, because he needed that faceoff guy that he lost when Dvorak signed with Philly. So the truth, like they say, the truth shall set you free. But Hughes definitely wanted Dvorak back. Jeff, you're right. Carey does do a lot of good out there. I'm not saying that he doesn't. But when he's under pressure, he's hot garbage. And that's the problem. When you're under pressure, that's when you need the defensemen to play at their best. Not when you've got a 2-goal or 3-goal lead, but when the game's on the line. And when the game's on the line, Carrier crumbles. It's simple. And yes, he does go for too many skates. That goes without saying. Richard Bonte, what do you think of the draw pass on the rush during the power play? Every team does it now, and I'm getting sick of looking at it. The other team set up 4 people along the blue line. Yes, Richard, they do. For years, and I mean years, I've told people I hate, it's called the slingshot, right? Because you drop the puck back, and your forward comes with at warp speed to try to get through 4 guys that are standing at the offensive blue line. My problem is not the concept of the slingshot, okay? I like the idea of a player coming into the zone with speed and forcing those guys to back off earlier than they'd like. My problem, though, is that along with those 4 players that are standing at the blue line are 2 other forwards and very possibly a defenseman. Because the slingshot is always built around getting that one guy into the zone, but then the other 4 guys have to play catch-up. And that's where the problem is. For example, I said, and earlier this season, the Canadiens actually did this, they had 2 guys in the slingshot, Caufield and Suzuki. Both came up the ice at the same time. That created a variant. And that variant wasn't defended well by other teams. And that's the reason why the Canadiens had success early on their power play, is that they had cleaner zone entries because the other team had to guess who was going to carry the puck into the zone. Now they've gone back to the traditional one guy coming up the ice, and it makes it more predictable. That pisses me off more. And the other part about it is this. At a certain point in time, when your player's skating up the ice, okay, your 2 guys that are posted up at the blue line, they need to move. And it's a quick curl to come and whether it's a curl along the boards to come in, or whether it's them crisscrossing as the other guy comes through, they're picking up momentum and speed to match the guy that's coming into the zone, so you attack as a group with more speed. Back the defense off even more. But that never happens. Instead, you've got the one guy coming in at warp speed, and God help you if he turns the puck over and it goes the other way. But I hate the slingshot as it is right now. I'd rather it be done the other way. But thank you for the question, Richard. Nico, you agree with me about Veleno, but even though you believe he's needed, you know that I know it will not happen. It's because Gallagher's a veteran. If you were talking about a guy who wasn't with the team as long as Gallagher, that change may very well have happened. But that also comes down to how much do the Montreal Canadiens really want to win this hockey game. To me, they're all playoff games, whether you're playing a West Coast team in a 2-point game or an East Coast team in a 4-point game. I absolutely think that they want to win this hockey game. And I think in their own minds, they think they have a better chance of doing it with Gallagher in the lineup. They've had 3 days rest. They're probably right. The Anaheim game, that remains to be seen whether or not they make any changes there, right? Obviously, we think that Fowler is going to start the second game. That goes without saying. But when it comes to the players in the lineup, oftentimes you're not going to see a change. So we'll see. I don't know. I'd like to see that Veleno change for Gallagher, but I don't think they're just going to do it. Apple Tile. Delegation is the difference between success and defeat in any profession. Hi, man, you're preaching to the converted. Montreal MUFC. Yeah, I know that Nyland, it was his rookie season that Nyland played with Jarvis. Jarvis was gone the next year. And no, they weren't on the same line at the time. Who the hell was Nyland playing with in that season? Because Gainey was playing with Jarvis. I think that Nyland was playing alongside, was it Napier and Chartres to start his career? I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at video. No channel. Happy Friday the 13th. I'm surprised it took this long for somebody to say it. There he is. This is Roy trying to get back at all of us that live in the Western Hemisphere, by the way, because Roy lives out in Thailand. And right now he's on the tee box, I believe, at Lamluka, right, Roy? And so, look up the Lamluka golf course. It's prominent in Thailand. It'll come up. And the weather there right now must be outstanding. But our weather, it's still cold, Roy. It's hockey season. Apple Tile, why am I showcasing Laine? Exactly. He's on an expiring contract, and everybody out there knows what he brings to the table, right? The only thing that Laine would need to prove to anybody is ability to play 5-on-5 defensively. Offensively, I'm not worried about him at all, and I don't think anybody will be. So from that perspective, people know what they're getting. But defensively, I mean, we saw a little bit of it, him playing on the fourth line early this year, and he looked okay. But after his injury, we don't know where he's at as far as that's concerned. So I'm not showcasing Laine. He's on an expiring contract. If the Canadiens decide to re-sign him for less money, hell, we'll look at it at that point. But you're not sitting out anybody until these playoffs are clinched, and that spot is reserved. After that, you can sit out Caufield, Suzuki, or Laine Hutson. Sure. Although I don't think Hutson will even accept that because he likes to be on the ice 24/7. Monty plays the same no matter what coach he has. I would agree to disagree with that because we've seen Montembeault play better, even under Eric Raymond, right? When he first came to Montreal from Florida, Monty was not good. And Raymond did do some good things with him, but getting him to the next level was the one thing that Eric Raymond couldn't do. So Monty has skill. He's just, his mental game is just not there right now. And that's not on the coaches. That's on him. Jeff Bocage, did you hear last game they said the Slav shit went in? I don't know if it's true. You mean the Slav shot, right? It was Caufield that had the shits. Okay, let me see here. I don't think it went in because it looked like it hit the bar. Now, the only and they never showed us a replay, right? The only thing that I could say is if it hit the inside bar in behind and came out, right? Clean. And oftentimes referees will miss that if it goes in fast. But then again, if it's that close, normally Toronto will review it and stop the game. If Toronto didn't review it, it means it didn't go in. So we'll leave it at that. Ryan, no more talking about trades. Let's see here. Why is Marty keeping Cole behind the net on the power play? If you can tell me that one, or anybody can explain that one to me, I'd be a happy camper. Now, here's a variance in the power play this year that is different from last year. Last year, of course, we had Patrik Laine on that side for the one-timer, right? And Cole was on the second wave, right? You had you didn't have Demidov on the right. You had Slafkovsky working the right side along with Caufield. So Caufield wasn't even a one-time option. You had Slafkovsky in the bumper or from net front, and you had Laine Hutson at the top of the point. And that's the thing, right? Either Caufield is or isn't the one-time option. And right now the Canadiens don't have a one-time option on the left side. How many times have we seen Nick Suzuki get the puck at the dot and not let go of a one-timer when you know that somebody like Caufield would? That in and of itself is part of the issue, okay? I don't understand why they don't do it. I mean, I could see them doing it, from the goal line because of what Caufield hasn't been able to do this season by scoring off the shoulder and whatnot, but those shots are few and far between. I think they need to switch more, and it's something Suzuki hasn't done. Suzuki doesn't go below the goal line. Suzuki doesn't skate in behind the net with the puck, and switch sides from behind the net, which he should. There's a lot of offense that can be created from behind the net. Just ask Wayne Gretzky. But I want to see Cole Caufield in the one-time position instead of Suzuki. And that's something that I don't understand, and I don't think I will. Because obviously on the right side, you've either got Slafkovsky over there coming off the bumper last time to score as a one-timer, or you've got Demidov there for a one-time option. But on the left side, right now, you don't have a one-time option. Suzuki doesn't let it rip, and Caufield's on the goal line. So I don't understand the logic. Really, I don't. Because the power play and its success is all predicated on variance. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, guess what? Your power play stops working. We're not in the locker room or on the bench, so we're not in a position to dismiss Gallagher or Monty or anything. The team is winning, so they're doing something right. I would agree with that. And the Montembeault thing, Violet, it doesn't have to be in the locker room. The mentality thing, it started in the preseason. Everybody's seen it. So everybody's been able to say, no, you can see clear as day that his mind's not where it needs to be in terms of goaltending. Any other goalie would have come out of this funk right now. But Montembeault's just so deep in his own head that he's creating these issues for him. When it comes to Gallagher's not a problem in the locker room, and on the bench, he definitely isn't. What everybody's talking about is fatigue, and that's obvious when you watch him play. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that, especially in this condensed schedule and this season, it's hurt him in terms of not only his age, but his performance on the ice. So you don't have to be in the locker room to recognize that, right? As I keep telling people, I've been doing this a long time. Been involved behind the bench for at least 25 years. And then, of course, front office, whatever you want. I can kind of tell when a guy is fatigued. And Gallagher's fatigued. Is he still effective? When he gets rest, absolutely. In back-to-backs, not as much. So we can agree on that part. It's not about locker room. It's not about bench. It's about performance. And that is visible to everybody. You don't have to be on the team to see it. Monty, unfortunately, Violet, is not going to be playing on this team very much longer. I would be surprised if he sees the net again. You know what, Jeff? I'd like to see Laine as well. As I mentioned before earlier in the show, and for those of you that didn't hear it, I'm sorry, but throughout that trade deadline, there were a lot of people that were speculating about Patrik Laine getting traded. And from the very beginning, I said he's not getting traded. The reason why I said that is because I knew what was going on behind the scenes. Still know what's going on behind the scenes. He's still working on his injury and coming back because an abdominal injury like that is never easy. And that's drummed up some old memories. So leave Laine alone. He'll be fine. And if the Canadiens keep him, I'd be happy with that because I think, one, he generally loves this city, and two, he loves this team. He loves playing in front of the Bell Center crowd. And, when you've got a guy who's that enthusiastic about a city, you know you're going to get his best when he's out there. That's what I want. I want to see a healthy Patrik Laine on the ice. If he re-signs for less money to stay in Montreal, I have no problem with that. And I don't think anybody else should have too, because I'm almost convinced that he'll perform. Don't worry about the misspelling, Jeff. Everybody does it, including myself. In your opinion, which team is best to face Montreal in the playoffs opening round? That's an interesting question. Because right now, if you look at where Montreal is in second in the division, obviously, given the way the standings are, or third in the division, I should say, they'd be facing off against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And historically, we know that the Tampa Bay Lightning have been a thorn in the Canadiens' ass. But so have the Buffalo Sabres. So I don't know, honestly. I don't think either or is actually a better matchup for the Montreal Canadiens because this year they both have our number. But again, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Tampa Bay has run hot and cold this year. So I don't know how they'd fare versus the Canadiens. But one thing's for certain, this Canadian team is better than last year's. So it won't be easy, no matter who they face. But I think Buffalo is going to be a tough out for any team in the Atlantic. Richard, you haven't seen Cole Caufield score shots from the goal line, off the goalie's shoulder and in, or far corner and in, or short side corner and in. He's done it multiple times this season. That's what I'm talking about. He doesn't step off from the goal line very far. He's right there, and he's shooting the puck from that very restricted angle. That's what I mean by goal line shot. Iron Mike, exactly. Well, not the red line at center, but the red line, the goal line. What's the best strategy to contain Celebrini? Keeping a tight gap and staying with him stride for stride. Shadow him. That's the best way to mitigate what he can do on the ice. The other four guys, you can zone him. But when you go man-to-man, especially in the defensive zone, there has to be a specific guy on Celebrini. And there can't be a switch. He's got to chase him throughout the zone. Don't give him time. Don't give him space. Don't give him a chance to breathe. Violet, love seeing Demidov crash the net and get the goal versus Ottawa. It happened so fast I swore it was Kapanen because he's always there until they said Demidov. You know, it was the perfect play from Demidov because he skated in and he followed the play. He saw Newhook taking the shot. He saw the defenseman open up and he knew he had a seam to go to the net. And Ullmark dropping the puck there, it was perfect. It was just a great read on his part. Even though I like Robida as a player, I really don't like his coaching. You can expect a player to play 9 minutes. You can't expect a player to play 9 minutes and improve. That's exactly my point. And I liked him as a player too because he's one of those smaller guys that overachieved in the NHL. And you always want to see those guys succeed. Like Frankie Bouillon, for example. That'd be another guy who I actually wouldn't mind seeing Bouillon move up from Laval or player development and come and help behind the bench defensively for the Canadiens. I think he'd be an asset. Laine and Dobich were the only reason the Canadiens got into the playoffs last year. Richard, that's a bit of a stretch because Dobich wasn't super fantastic, although he did save the Canadiens bacon with that 5-0 record at Christmas time. But Laine's power play goals, absolutely. Jeff, if Hage comes up, who would you take out? Look, he's going to play at center. So the centerman we'd have to take out would probably be somebody like either an Evans or a Danault, although I don't foresee them taking Danault out. If we would come up to play the wing, the guy I'd be taking out of the lineup would most likely be somebody like a Zach Bolduc. Because Bolduc, despite the fact that he's a young player in his second year, he hasn't been very effective. Gang, gang, we're going to end it there. It's been a long day. Time for us to shut it down. It's been another great discussion, another great live show. Thank you all for joining. A lot better than last week's, which was a little too late and a hell of a lot more tired. So I apologize for that episode in spades. But a great discussion and a great game coming up tomorrow versus the San Jose Sharks. Will the Canadiens play differently? Will they be able to mitigate those second period blunders? And will they be able to hold on to a lead late in the hockey game? All questions that we need to see. Plus, will Dobich be better? A lot going into this hockey game. It's always a very important 2 points, especially with the back-to-back against the Ducks on Sunday. Again, thanks for joining. For those of you that haven't, make sure you subscribe. On the other side, stupid. And get notified and make sure you leave a like on the video. And we'll see you after tomorrow night's